And welcome back to Migration Season 3, the illustrated talks on everything you wanted to know about non-localized consciousness and beyond. Today, we are taking our previous discussions about interacting and meeting with lucid dream characters in a completely new direction. Specifically, we're talking about sexual contact with these personalities, what that's like, and what are the implications of an intimate connection on that plane of awareness. Right off the bat, I'm going to warn my viewers right now that if for any reason frank discussions about sex and sexuality bothers you, that is fine. You may want to skip these next couple of episodes. Now, for those of you who are still with me, it's not necessary that you've watched those previous episodes first at all, but if you want a wider perspective on the implications of meeting and interacting with intelligent beings on that plane of consciousness, I highly recommend going back and checking those out. Now, I have broken this larger discussion into two parts, which can be watched independently for sure, but the insights we're going to cover in both episodes are really going to complement each other. And the reason I did this is because we really need to start with a solid grounding of the very nature of lucid dreaming first before we can really appreciate what it means to do something specific in those states, like having sex. So first, we need to kind of go back and revisit some of those ideas we started covering back at the very beginning of Season 1. In a lucid dream state, everything around you can appear just as and often more real than anything you can experience in your daily reality. If you're in a forest, it's a hyper-real forest. You can touch and often interact with the plant life around you. You can smell damp earth beneath your feet. You can feel the warmth of the sun on your face. You can hear the wind in the leaves and the birds singing. It's like you suddenly come to the deepest realization that there has always been a volume control on your very perception, and it's generally been turned down to like a 3 or a 4, and you've been walking through your life in a dim and distracted state, and now that volume control is turned up to a 10. And as I discussed with Dave Green in the previous episodes, yes, sometimes you can find yourself surrounded by other intelligent personalities in these conscious visions. They may appear as humans, they could be animals, or even plants, or even creatures you've never even imagined before. You can engage with them and have fully realized back and forth discussions with them that can appear perfectly natural, where you feel there's a real sharing of ideas, and their responses, their facial gestures, body language, all appear just as real and spontaneous as any interactions you could carry on with a sentient being in your normal daily life. So with all of that in mind, it shouldn't be too hard to imagine that you may find yourself physically attracted to some of these characters you run into. In fact, you may find yourself face to face with the very embodiment of your greatest sexual fantasy. And it can get deeper than that. You may find yourself filled with this sudden, irrational, deep love for this character you're faced with. So of course, this led a lot of lucid dreamers to start exploring questions like, so can I have sex with these characters? Is that allowed? And what does that even mean? What are the implications of having some kind of sexual contact with a apparently sentient being that you are finding in a lucid dream state? And what happens if I do? What would that be like? That is the strange and enlightening subject we are diving into today, so get comfortable, smoke 'em if you got 'em, and get ready for today's episode of Migration. The very awareness behind our senses, our thoughts, and our very notion of self is born of a limitless, universal consciousness that transcends time, space, birth, and death. And to this blissful, perfected state of awareness we will return. There is no escaping it. We will all eventually migrate back to this point. And along the way, an idea will begin to grow, a sense that we never actually left our source to begin with, which to the thinking, rational mind can sound like a total paradox. On this return path, we'll begin to sense that there's a sort of trick being performed on our perception, a veil that is blocking our view from our full potential, from what we actually are. You found this little corner of mine on the internet because you sensed this for some reason, on some level. Now you want to know more. How exactly is this trick performed? Is there something I can do to remove the veil blocking my view? And what might happen if I do? Welcome to Migration, the Return Path. Before we get started, I want to point something out to you that's going to become really relevant in a myriad of ways as you follow this journey. This journey will often remind you of going in a complete circle, which is why I use that flaming ring around our little explorer in the banner on this channel. You're going to find that this discussion, like many others, have this tendency to come full circle at the end, where there's a sort of a return to a starting position. As I say in the introduction, on the larger scale, we're on the return path back to our source, back to our home. And we can see that same pattern play out in the finer details along the way as well. Specifically, as you gain wisdom and insight, you find yourself returning to perspectives and initial assumptions that you were carrying when you first set out on this path of discovery. But as you circle back around, you revisit it in a brand new light. You enjoy a new appreciation for a concept you may have thought you totally understood, something you blindly accepted as true, something you may have taken for granted. You'll see what I mean by the end of this two-part episode. So in order to have a clearer perspective of what it means to have sex in a lucid dream, we first need to realize something that even much of the lucid dreaming community doesn't tend to address, and that is that you can enter a state of lucid consciousness regardless of what is happening to the physical body. That means that ultimately it doesn't matter if your body is asleep or fully awake in a meditative state or under the influence of a psychoactive, or if the body has even physically shut down from some extreme physical trauma, as in the case of the near-death experience. Now, what is taking place with the physical body can certainly change how the experience feels and how it plays out, but the state of consciousness we're dealing with is ultimately the same. Yeah, in a lucid dream state, the body, which is very much attached to this physical realm we're familiar with, is asleep. So what can transpire in that state can more readily break the limited bounds this physical world tends to operate by. And I remind you this because so many of us get overly attached to chasing after the first or even the next lucid dream when you should be practicing entering that state of consciousness while you're awake and in full control of your capacity. Don't keep putting off entering those incredible expanded realms of consciousness, until you enter a lucid dream state. I come into contact with so many people who are just hoping and praying that they'll have a lucid dream someday, or they're waiting for the next one to come along. They're always reaching for the future, which is ultimately self-defeating. Remember, the source of reality can only ever be found in the present moment, always, and that is true regardless of what's happening with the physical body. So when you're instead placing all of your attention on a state of awareness you hope to reach in the future, you're cutting off all the power that you have in the present moment. And I want you to remember that, because that's one of those things we're going to come back around to when we dive into sexual desire in the lucid state. The true source of your perception is always available in the now. It is, it has, and always will be the only place that door can be found. Okay, so let's talk a little more deeply about this, the nature of this state of consciousness that I'm pointing to here. As I've been saying from the very first video on this channel, it is one that is unbound, unidentified to an internal story, to a context or a narrative about who you are, what you're doing. Now, in a dream state, that looks like this. You suddenly step back from the story of the dream, whatever drama you may be involved in, no matter how crazy it seems in retrospect. You may be dreaming you're a secret agent searching for hidden alien technology on Mars, and then suddenly you realize, wait, none of this is real. This is a story I'm playing out in my head. And isn't it odd that you generally don't realize how crazy the story is until after you wake up? We don't question it while the narrative is in place. When you become truly 100% lucid, you see the story for exactly what it is. Your awareness is no longer caught up in a stream of thought that is holding your reality in a cage. You become aware of the only point reality exists, again, and that is the present moment as it unfolds. And what transpires from that point could be called bliss, a bliss that can take 1,001 shapes and formations. But we have to understand, in a meditation state during the day, the goal is still exactly the same. You are centering your awareness on the moment as it unfolds, and you are releasing your obsessive compulsion to live through the internal dialogue, which is constantly weaving a story about your life. I'm so-and-so, this is what I do, these are my concerns, this is what I did today, this is what I want for the future. You are trying to become lucid in the moment, regardless if you are in a meditative state during the day or if you are asleep and in an REM state. The goal is still the same. So, right now, even as you watch this video, there's a context operating in your background right now that is helping keep your world linear. And again, that context that you maintain, it may look as simple as a vague notion on the periphery of your mind whispering to you, well, I was at work earlier and now I'm on my lunch break, so I'm sitting at this coffee shop watching this guy's video, but I have to be back at work in 45 minutes and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, of course, there's far more to your story than just your immediate situation, but the mind doesn't need to churn through the entirety of your full story constantly in order to hold your reality together. It just needs to keep you attached to a small thread that leads back to that massive story of who you are. If you are meditating in the way I personally recommend in my other videos, in one way or another, you remove yourself from all of those story threads. You practice setting it aside temporarily. You are just sitting and letting yourself breathe, and you are focused only on reality as it unfolds, and not the imagination, not the running narration going on, because that really is the only thing that is actually happening. As I've said many times, I don't recommend spending all of your meditations imagining you're in a magical cave or fantasizing about golden spiritual light energy filling your chakras or whatever. When you are truly surrendered to the present, those energies will naturally arise. And then at that point, you can meet those energies and that kind of phenomena for what it is, as it truly exists, and not what you imagine that it might be like from books you've read or videos you've watched. We don't wake up in our dreams because we don't know how to wake up to our daily reality. Our daily life keeps us chasing after solutions to problems and dramas in the exact same way a dream does. It keeps you running through a maze focused only on solving the next problem. When your attention is consumed by problem solving, it can't step back and evaluate the system as a whole. And it doesn't matter how insane or impossible the dream may be, just like it doesn't matter how insane and ridiculous our life may be. We're stuck in it until we can step back with a real perspective and go, wait, none of this is actually taking place at all. It's all just a running narrative in my head. Stop and pay attention to your present circumstance and be aware of what part of your reality is actually happening now and how much of it lives only as an abstraction inside your imagination. So, if you can achieve this state of present moment awareness in the dream state, you're suddenly free from the story that you were trapped within. The goal you had a moment ago of, say, uncovering that alien technology buried below the surface of Mars is now exposed for the ridiculous narrative it always was. So you need to ask yourself, how did I ever believe that story? Most people don't ever ask that about their own dreams. They just accept that that's just how the mind works. It gets tricked at night into believing these insanities. And if you don't ever stop and consider how strange that is, you'll never consider how the mind is weaving your reality during the day, just as it does in a dream state, because you believe what you think. You accept the reality your brain narrates to you. But you don't have to. You can learn to question it. And there is incredible power found there, and amazing experiences can unfold from that point of present moment awareness. And one of those experiences that can unfold can be carrying out sexual fantasies within that state of awareness. So now, with all of this in mind, we can now focus exclusively on what it means to have a sexual encounter on that plane of awareness. So that is the topic we're going to exclusively focus on in part 2 of this episode, which should be out in a couple of weeks, depending on when you're watching this video. So thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. That really does help my channel out. I certainly appreciate it. If, of course, you ever want to dive deeper into these topics, go check out the book that this entire series is based on. It gets much more into the specifics of how our brain deals with these narratives, how we can wake up from these storylines that we are carrying, not just at night, but during the day as well. It's all kind of the same dynamic that we can rise above. So go check that out if this topic really interests you. So until next time, thanks so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.